Cardio and weights, which do I do first? Well, the simple answer to that question is, how important is building muscle to you? If that is your sole focus, then you should just do those two things separately, either separated with several hours and some meals, or just on different days entirely. Assuming that you insist on doing both in one session, like I do, which we have to realize is not the best option for muscle building, but could be a better option for a holistic approach to strength and conditioning in terms of sustainability and integration into one's lifestyle. Which do you do first? The answer in my recommendation is you do your conditioning first and then you do your weight training after. So you're doing something to tell your body, hey, we need to build more muscle here specifically. Like, okay, build more muscle here. Build more muscle here. When we do that, we want to then provide the recovery means to facilitate that action immediately or as soon as possible. We don't want to provide the stimulus for muscle growth and then provide a conflicting stimulus immediately following that before we have nutrition. Does that make sense? There is less systemic perturbation from conditioning than there is local or systemic perturbation, disruption from a good resistance training session. So you want to make sure that as soon as you're done with that, you allow for the recovery of that to take place. And you're going to interfere with that to the extent that that's what it's called, the interference effect, when you do your conditioning immediately following your resistance training. Crazy hypothetical situation, like Tom Platz type stuff, right? Cool. So you're super hardcore and you've made your weight training as painful as possible. Well, if you do some cardio after that, say you do like 20 minutes on the step mill, right? And you're like, okay, cool. Now my hamstrings aren't nearly as sore. Well, you have reduced some of the follow-on inflammatory process that is part of the recovery. It's not necessarily the muscle breakdown from the training that is doing that. It's like the cytokines and all of the immune response that is part of recovery, that, you know, the little guys are going in and they're scavenging damaged cells, and the recovery process in of itself has an inflammatory component. And so by reducing that, you're actually limiting part of the recovery process and essentially missing out on a meaningful portion of your gains. We also have to address the fact that if you're going to do both of these things in the same session, conditioning and weight training, there's going to be trade-offs. So even if you're extremely well conditioned, you're just not going to be as strong as you would be if you were fresh going into your weight training. And that's okay, because you can still be strong enough and train hard enough to cross the threshold of meaningfully productive training. You just have to take into account that fatigue component on the front end when you're programming your training, and not say, okay, no matter what, like my 1RM deadlift is 500, I'm pulling 505 today after I do my 30K bike. Might not be a good idea to make that attempt. Our intensity, injury, concentration, psychological concerns. A lot of these can be addressed by just playing with your nutrition, particularly your timing of. So if you're the kind of person where you like to train on empty, but you're going to do your conditioning and your lifting, then you're probably going to want to have a heavier, more carb-intensive meal, several hours before, so you have stored glycogen. Like for instance, I have my biggest meal at the end of the day, so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm ostensibly fasted. However, not really, because my muscles and liver are full of glycogen, and if I need it, I can just dig into that for training, which I generally don't need for my conditioning. So when I get off the bike or the step mill, because I don't exceed my zone 2 capacity, I can just go straight into my weight training, and I still got plenty of juice and plenty of mental concentration left over. Not everybody's like that. If you're the kind of person where you can't train unless you've had, you know, some food in you, particularly some carbs, then do that. You know, train after you eat. Or even better, eat while you train. Not like bring a meal to the gym, but you know, you could like fill a shaker full of a protein carb mixture and sip on that while you're training, so you have a steady supply of carbohydrates and amino acids in your bloodstream to kind of, number one, keep that anti-catabolic lever pulled, but number two, just have energy to do the work and to have the mental focus to concentrate, make sure you have a high movement fidelity so that you can prevent injury, and make sure that you cross that threshold into meaningful training so you're not just kind of phoning it in and doing junk volume. Because if that's the case, then you might as well just go home after your conditioning and do your weight training another day. So kind of understand your training needs and your psychology, and also your lifestyle needs. So whether or not it's better for you to train like in the morning, after work, during lunch, and how much time you have to do either of those. And, you know, maybe doing both your conditioning and your lifting at the same time just isn't the better option for you. This video is to address those individuals like myself where it is the better option, because now at this point, as much as I want to go back to the gym for a second or a third iteration, most days it's not going to happen. It's all going to happen the same time, or it's not going to happen at all. So for me, even though it might not be the best choice to be the biggest, strongest me I could be, I don't really care about that right now. What I care about is making sure that I do something every day, because the consistency has had the biggest, most meaningful impact on my body composition, my health markers, my productivity at work, my mood, everything. So because that means more to me than anything, being consistent, I do both at the same time, and I do them in this way so that I can have a high frequency of conditioning, because the fidelity of that signal is low, so the frequency has to be high. So in my case, it's every day. And then I can have a lower frequency, so 3 to 5 times a week, or in some cases only even 1 time a week, depending on how work is. But I can make sure that the fidelity of that signal is high, and then as soon as I get that lifting, that is, and then as soon as I get my lift in, it's immediately back to the hotel room or back to the car, or maybe even in my gym bag, and I'm downing my shake immediately, because I want to capture that lifting signal, that muscle building, or worst case scenario, muscle retention signal. I want to capture that and cultivate that for as long as possible, because that only happens if I make it happen. I just recently realized that as many shorts as I put out with my day-to-day training vlog and then all these videos, it started to get messy and cluttered, and a lot of the older stuff, people just aren't gonna dig through all the newer stuff to find. So I went ahead and organized everything in playlists that are kind of self-explanatory. So if you go on the channel and you click on a playlist, you can very easily access whatever kind of information that you're looking for, whether it's fat loss or strength training or hypertrophy or diet tips, tricks, and hacks. I got a whole playlist of those. So I kind of made it organized so it's a little bit easier to access some of this information, and I'll try to keep it that way moving forward. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and stay in the fight.